Here we come, blue and white, and we're looking good. You'll be in for a fight, and we fight pretty good. Getting goals is our job, and we get goals good. Looking good, we are Carlisle United.
Yes, the league action is underway, but it's now time for a taste of that sweet, sweet Carabao. Yes, it's midweek League Cup action, and Brunton Bugle is back with a mini preview episode. I'm Lee Rooney.
And I'm Mike Booth.
And today we're going to be catching up with the guys from the BladesPod about how their season has gone and previewing the big cup game at Bramall Lane.
With a pass so true to Boulder Stone and Clark's in view. There's a cross and a run. The old one too.
Now going for the first time this season outside of the season preview episode. I've got Mike Booth as my guest, my co-host even. Sorry, how's it going, mate?
Well, not too good to be honest. I don't feel very well. I've got Carabao Cup fever.
There we go. He was there. He was waiting to come. Every time, it always seems to get it this time. Yeah, I don't know what it is. But there you go. No, it's a little bit disappointing at the weekend, obviously, with the draw. We're not going to go into detail about the Colchester game. That's going to be in the match preview game for the Swindon game at the weekend. Me and Dan are going to do that one, as we were both at the game. Mike, unfortunately, wasn't able to make it.
Part-timer.
I know, it's pathetic. So what we're going to do, basically, we're going to preview the Sheffield United game. We're not going to do the X-Blue section here because, again, we'll round that up next week. We'll very briefly touch on the main bit of news that obviously came out over the weekend. I should probably make an apology for my tweet that I put out on the Brunton Bugle account the other day, saying, isn't it great to have a pre-season with no disruption and everything going fine for us? That brilliant. Night before the first game and it all kicks off. Superb. Yeah. First up, the competition. Obviously, last episode we mentioned the fact we're giving away a pair of the Walling socks that our good friends at the Sock Council have put together, styled in the site. The Cal United kit of 94-95, famously the title-winning season. The competition is now closed, but we don't actually have a winner yet because obviously no one scored at the weekend. Because the question obviously was to guess who would score Cal United's first goal of the season, and it was a 0-0 draw. So it rolls over to the game against Sheffield United in the Cup. Hopefully we'll score in that, and we won't have to roll over to the Swindon game. But basically, as soon as someone's scored, we'll then collate the people who've come up with that name, and we'll do a random draw to decide who wins it. So you can't take part now because the first game's gone. You had to do it before I think it was 2:45, I think it said, on Saturday. So if you haven't got your entry in by now, it's tough luck, basically. So there you go. Okay, Mike, let's very briefly cover this bit of news. Me and Dan will go into a bit more detail on it at the weekend, but we want to give you a chance as well to have your say, really. Aaron Hayden has obviously left the club, unfortunately. Vice-captain has signed a 3-year deal with Moneybags Wrexham in the National League. Undisclosed fee. I mean, I'm not hugely surprised by that. And I can understand why, really, because we probably don't want to give away our hand as to how much money we've got if we're potentially going out there looking for a replacement. Just basically briefly, Mike, your thoughts on the move?
Yeah, I mean, from the numbers that have been bandied about, I've heard a few people say 3-year deal and $5,000 a week. You can't blame the lad for taking that, can you?
No,
you know, I mean, some are bemoaning, it's a step down. Yeah, but you know, footballers have short careers. He's on more money than the Prime Minister for playing football in non-league, effectively. Do you know what I mean? So. You can't blame him. He was a good player for us, and he was settled into the local community. There was obviously the stuff about him gritting the roads when it was snowy and stuff.
His kid was born here in Cumbria, wasn't she? So
yeah, exactly.
There's one for you.
Absolutely no hard feelings towards the lad from me, anyway.
No, not at all. I'll obviously discussed it with Dan at the weekend, but you can understand why he's done it. I do feel it's a little bit of a backward step because there were Championship and League One clubs interested in him last season. Hull and Brentford, by all accounts, were both really keen, and there was a few rumours swirling. I'm not sure about these ones, saying that Celtic were even watching him potentially. But yeah, really sad to see him go. But wish him all the best, and it's made us a bit of money, and if we can get a decent replacement in and still have a bit of cash left over, brilliant. That's just the way it'll go.
Definitely, and the way that Beach's recruitment has gone, I've got faith in him to get in a suitable replacement as well.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's get on to the main part of the show then. Obviously, to mention the fact that, our sponsor for this season is the Carlisle United Supporters Club London branch. The London branch is open to all Carlisle United fans. They've got members from Cornwall to Dundee and Houston to Singapore, and of course every part of London and the South East. They regularly meet up on away trips, as well as arranging many social events and sports games. And I do a lot of fundraising for the club, actually. Should point out they've given a hell of a lot of money towards the club down the years. They're going to be providing us some information for the away games as part of their preview section this season too. You can find out more about the London branch at their website, carlisle.londonbranch.org. And I do know that actually a few people have listened to the podcast have already actually signed up as members, so fantastic to hear that. We'll talk about the game itself shortly, and we'll have that pub suggestion that the London branch have given us for the game. But first up, I caught up with Ben from the BladesPod podcast ahead of the big match to find out how they've been getting on in pre-season, not particularly well by the sounds of things, how they've coped with the drop from the Premier League to the Championship, and some chat about some classic encounters and some players who've got links between both clubs. So here's the chat I had with Ben earlier today. Ben, thanks for taking time to speak to us. It seems a long time since we played you guys, but it's actually only 7 years ago, back in League One. We had a few ding-dongs back then, didn't we? And you guys were obviously one of the fallen giants in the division, because there used to be quite a few clubs like that in League One back in the day. Still is now, I guess, with Sunderland and co. And you had a real struggle of getting out of the division back then, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say it's only 7 years. I think for Sheffield United fans, it's been a very full 7 years. I'd say a lot has happened in that time. I mean, so yeah, we last played in 2014. Since then, we went through, I think, our worst league finish for something like 40, 50 years, which was under Nigel Adkins. He only lasted one season. Chris Wilder comes in, and then we have the whole Chris Wilder experience for the next 5 years, basically, which has sadly come to a conclusion now, but he very quickly got us out of League One. You know, we went from 6 years just completely in the doldrums at that level, you know, where we genuinely looked like we were getting worse year after year, culminating in that low season under Adkins. Wilder comes in, we get 100 points the first season. We sort of push for the playoffs in the Championship the next season. Then we get promoted. Then we finish top 10 in the Premier League. And finally, the journey ends with relegation last season. So, yeah, it is only 7 years, but, I mean, that feels like a lifetime ago as a supporter of United, to be honest.
You know, it's 7 years since we got relegated from League One, so it feels a long time for us as well, I think it's fair to say. Just before we recorded it, we were discussing the last time we played and looking at the lineups. I mean, of your team, there's only one player that sort of stands out for me there, and that's Connor Cody, who's obviously now at Wolverhampton Wanderers. Pretty much completely changed it. Same for us, to be fair. I mean, Jordan Pickford was in net for us and Pascal Chimbonda at right back. But bar that, pretty much the whole team and squad has changed. And the only other name actually that stands out there is Stefan Skugel. Obviously ended up playing for Carlisle for a couple of seasons. So
Are you skipping over Harry Maguire there for any particular reason?
Well, I was going to actually come on to him in a second, actually, funny enough. Okay. Because when we talk about games we played in League One, one game always stands out to me, and that's the game we played on, I think it was New Year's Day in 2012. And that was a proper humdinger of a game, I remember. I think there was a good crowd, maybe 7,000 or 8,000 in. You guys, obviously, as usual, brought, I think, at least 1,500, 2,000. And that was the game where I think Harry Maguire would probably rather forget, because I seem to remember he got torn apart by Francois Zoko in that game. like many players at that level did when Francois was on his game, which, you know, could be 50-50 chance whether that would happen quite often. But I seem to remember that was a really good game, that one, because obviously I think Ched Evans got a brace in that match. And like I said, Zoko, I think, set up the opening goal. And in fact, he might score the opening goal. I think he set up the second one as well. So, yeah, it's amazing when you go back and you think of these games. And like I said, he's the one that stands out, and you think, 7 years ago, but I mean, he must have been only about 18, 19 back then, I think he was for you.
Who was Maguire then? Yeah, so I think that was his first. I mean, he made his debut when we were in the Championship, but only towards the end of that season. So this was his first season of proper senior football. Yeah, I think he was 18 at the time, maybe just turned 19 during the season. He was, I mean, you know, he's an imposing presence now. Yeah, what is this? That's 9 years on, but he was like that at 18. He was, you know, real. He didn't look like a boy amongst men, put it like that. No. And it's been awesome seeing his development. I didn't think he would reach those levels. I thought he was probably, this was while we're in League One, obviously. I thought maybe lower Premier League, but then he becomes the most expensive defender in the world, and, you know, probably England's best centre half, to be honest. So it's been awesome to see.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Let's talk briefly then about your sort of last two seasons in the Premier League, what it was like for you as a fan. I mean, that first season must have been, up until obviously the pandemic kicked in, it must have been beyond your wildest dreams. Obviously, there was a chance at one point where you were potentially pushing for a Champions League place. I think it was probably always going to be just out of reach, but you must have been amazed at how well you took to it. And obviously, after that, the downfall the following season with no fans there seemed to have a really big effect, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so. COVID, I'd say that, well, and I'm talking to a club here that obviously massively affected by, disrupted by COVID last season, if nothing else. But yeah, I'd say out of the Premier League clubs, I feel like us and Liverpool were the two that kind of suffered the most from not having fans in the ground last season. That first season, I think that wasn't the only reason we sort of fell off last year. I think we had a load of injuries which really disrupted us. We didn't sign. I think our signings were not particularly good either, and I think Wilder just couldn't get us out of the rut, basically. But the season before was, I think it has to be the best season that I've enjoyed as a United fan. It was, we went into it just hoping to stay up, I guess. That was the limit of, I think, a lot of fans' expectations. But, right up until lockdown 1, the outbreak of the pandemic, as you say, it was not impossible that we could get in the Champions League. And yeah, I think our performance was starting to dip a little bit, but we were still getting results around that time. And, we were really going toe-to-toe against the very best teams. I mean, I think it was only against Liverpool and Man City we didn't actually score in the 2 games we played against each of those teams. But we kept really close and gave them some really hard games. Yeah. And, you've got Pep and Klopp basically saying this club's doing stuff that it poses as a real problem, and I watch their games with nothing but admiration. It's like, oh my God, what is happening at Sheffield United? And then, obviously the next season has brought us down to earth a little bit, and hopefully we can start to build something new this season. I think going into last season, nobody expected us to carry on that kind of top 10 push. I think we knew we'd sort of caught a little bit lightning in a bottle, I think. So we expected a bit of a step back, but yeah, one thing kind of piled on top of each other and led to a complete drop-off, unfortunately.
Let's talk about one of the players who actually did leave after that end of that first Premier League season, a player that Carlisle fans like to watch very closely because it quite often adds to the club coffers every time he plays for Man United. It's Dean Henderson. How big a player was he for you? I mean, he's a big personality, isn't he? And I suppose losing him between the sticks must have been a really big blow, as well as Ramsdale did coming to the club after that. Losing someone like Henderson must really affect the squad.
Yeah, I think it probably did a little bit. I think maybe our own fans kind of overrated that a little bit in the first few months of the season. Put it like this, I think if Dean Henderson had played the whole season in goal for us, I think we would have still got relegated because our defence just, through injury, suspension and loss of form, just completely collapsed, basically. Yeah. Defence was amazing the previous 2 seasons. So Henderson was kept pretty quiet. It's just when he was required to do something, he did it superbly. And as you say, I don't think I've seen a goalkeeper have that level of self-confidence and personality. And he was, even though he was only on loan with us for those 2 seasons, you could tell he was a massive part of the changing room and just the whole kind of atmosphere around the club. So yeah, it's a shame. I think we all wanted another season out of him, and I still sort of feel that might have been the best thing for his career. But he obviously knew best. He ended up playing for Man United last season much more than I expected him to.
Yeah,
he'd have been, I guess he would have probably been the number 2 going into the Euros as well had he not got injured. So it was sad to leave. He just became such a massive favourite. I mean, considering he was only on loan, within probably 6 weeks of his first season, I think everyone was like, this guy is pretty special. And also, he absolutely loves it. You can just tell he's completely committed, not just on social media, but interacting with the fans and stuff. I think it might have been our 3rd or 4th game that season, and we scored a last-minute winner against Norwich in front of the Kop, and everyone's going mad. And then I suddenly realised that Henderson's run the full length of the pitch to get involved in the celebrations, and I thought, yep, we've got a good one here. This is a good lad. He's fully bought into this team, and it's nice to think that we played a part, I guess, in his development.
Yeah, let's talk about your new manager then. Obviously, the man who's replaced Wilder. How do you think he's getting on so far? I mean, not the greatest start to the season at the weekend, was it? But are you reasonably confident for this campaign?
I think so. There's so many unknowns. I mean, we're clearly trying to play a different way based on one game. our pre-season's been a mess. We've basically played 2 friendlies in like 6 weeks, and one of them was against pretty much a semi-pro side, to be honest. So our preparation going into the season's been really disrupted. We had a COVID outbreak that meant players had to train apart for 2 weeks. In fact, I think several of our friendlies got cancelled because of outbreaks at other clubs. So I think there's a bit of an understanding, certainly amongst people I know, that this is going to take a bit of time. But yeah, you kind of itch. He favours a much more sort of slow build-up, possession-heavy approach, which is quite different to what we've seen in the last 2 seasons. You could see we were trying to do that on Saturday. We had 75% possession, which I don't think we've done for probably 3 seasons. It's just you could clearly tell we're still trying to work out how to turn that possession into good chances. We had a lot of shots, but not many actual good chances against Birmingham. But it was nice to see us have the ball a little bit. I think we were like bottom 5 for possession the last couple of seasons in the Premier League. Which you kind of expect for a team who's just got promoted or are struggling against relegation. But I think there's an understanding that we're going to try something different. Whether these players can adapt to that or whether we need new players to play in a different way, time will tell, I suppose.
Because he's a manager, isn't he? He's got a bit of reputation, Djukanovic, of teams playing good football in the Championship, wasn't he? I think with Fulham especially, I think his teams were really quite well praised in the way they tried to play. Obviously, he wasn't able to make the step up to the Premier League, but it's one of those ones, isn't it? You're very much changing style this season, I guess, in the way you're going to be looking at things.
I think so, yeah. And I kind of mentioned it earlier. I've got nothing but respect for what Wilder gave us, the best era of my lifetime supporting this club. But it had got a bit stale that last season, and I do think having a new manager was the right thing to do. I mean, my fellow podcaster and I think in January we were sort of saying, can Wilder not just go on holiday for the rest of the season? We're already down essentially. There's no way we're going to come back from this. I would still like Chris Wilder to be the manager, but I wanted to have a break from this relentless misery that is this season. So a new manager comes in. I think on paper, I think he's probably the best manager we could have hired. Realistically, as you said, he's got that. He's got the reputation. He's got the CV of promotion from this level. The football's supposed to be good. He's actually our first foreign coach as well, which is, I don't know how that feels like a bit of a departure for us in terms of a significant step to not just being completely British based. So I'm hopeful anyway, but also acknowledge that I don't expect us to be firing on all cylinders for at least a month or so.
No, definitely not. Well, let's have a look at the cup tie then. Obviously, so you open up your season against Birmingham this weekend, I think, with a narrow defeat. Are you expecting big changes for this game? Are you expecting a few fringe players to be thrown in maybe and mix things up? Or do you think the manager might look and think, we need to get off to a good start? We don't want to be losing to a team from League Two at home, so let's put a fairly strong team out for this game.
I'm not sure he'll have that second thought in mind, but I do think it'll be a strong team purely because, as I said, we've hardly had a pre-season. I kind of wish this game could have been played maybe last weekend or midweek, to be honest. It's
funny you say that because we were supposed to play a bigger club. I think it was a Championship club. In fact, I think most of our fans have worked out who this is because basically we had a fans forum last week where our chief executive sort of let on that because we played Halifax as our last pre-season friendly at home. It was a really weird game. I was like, that's not a big time. Why are we playing them at home? But it turns out we were supposed to play someone on the Saturday. They pulled out at the last minute because they got offered a bigger club to play. Then said bigger club had to pull out of the game against them at the weekend because of COVID reasons. That Championship club comes back to us and says, well, can we play you now? And we said, well, no, we can't let Halifax down. We've agreed to a game with them. You can probably work out who the Championship club were because it was quite well publicised that their game against this Premier League club was called off. The club haven't said it, but I think we've guessed it's Preston, basically.
They played Burnley.
I think they played Burnley under 23s in the end, was the rumour, but they were supposed to play Manchester United. So they pulled out to play Man United because they knew that would get them some money. This is allegedly, I don't know if it's true. The club have basically not said the name of the club, but they've given enough hints to give it away. So we could have played it, but it's just circumstances for there you go.
Yeah, but no, I think it'll be a pretty strong team, to be honest. I mean, our bench looked really strong at the weekend. We might have been the strongest bench we've named for a very long time. I think you'll see. I think you will see a lot of names starting for us. I think Brewster, probably Billy Sharp as well. I wouldn't be too shocked if we switch the goalkeeper around and just give our backup a run out. But as I say, we played 2 friendlies and we took the entire 11 off at half time or after an hour in another one. So there's just hardly any minutes in the legs. I will not be surprised if it is our strongest available team. It's more likely to be a bit of a hybrid, I think.
Yeah, I mean, looking at your bench here, it's actually terrifying. Look at how good it is. If some of the players coming in, then it's going to be a tough evening for us, I think. Interesting, Elsie, I noticed the fact that one of your starters there, Oliver Norwood, he's an ex-Carlisle player. He had a loan spell with us from Manchester United. Funny enough, around about the time I think that Henderson went to them. So probably one of those ones where we got a bit of bonus there in that sense of that. I think he only stayed for 3 months in the end, and we looked to extend him. I think he got injured. But how's he doing for you these days? I remember him being quite a cultured sort of midfielder who could pick out a pass for us.
One of the best signings we've made in recent times, for sure. He kind of just transformed us when we signed him in the promotion season. Just an amazing. I haven't seen anyone be able to pass the ball like he has. His range of passing is insane. Struggled a lot last season. He was phenomenal first season in the Premier League. One reason or another, looked like he just hit a sort of physical wall last year, an athletic wall, and he was just exposed constantly, not helped by the rest of the team, not being able to support him properly, and all the sort of changing parts around him. I think he could have a big season for us because, as I say, we're going to play in a more, I guess a slower tempo, try and keep the ball more kind of fashion. He was almost playing like a third centre-half for us against Birmingham, just, picking up the ball and starting pretty much every attack. But yeah, I would say he struggled last season, but he's been phenomenal for us. Like, just a delight to watch.
Speaking of other players in both squads, you've got links to either club. In your squad, Regan Slater. What's happening with him? Because he obviously was on loan at Hull last season. Apparently did really well. He looked decent for us as a sort of holding midfielder. I think he's played a bit further forward these days. What's happening with him? Because there was a lot of talk he might leave in the summer. Yeah,
he's still a fringe player for us. I'm not sure he's going to make it with us, to be honest. He might play tomorrow night or be on the bench or something, but even though we're quite light in terms of midfield numbers, I think we are about to sign another sort of starting calibre midfielder, so that'll kind of push him down the pecking order. I think there's a couple of other youngsters who are a couple of years behind him in terms of development, who I think are more highly thought of at United. Zach Brunton is one of them. So I expect that he'll probably leave, if not permanently this season, then on loan for sure.
And Marcus Dewhurst obviously as well in your squad, and he was on loan with us last season. Didn't probably get the game time I think you guys expected, because it turned out the injury to our second choice keeper wasn't as bad as we expected. So he played it in FA Cup tie though, made a brilliant penalty save against Hayes and Yeading United.
Oh, I actually remember seeing that, yeah.
Like, genuinely one of the best penalty saves I've seen to tip it onto the bar. Really see.
Yeah.
He looks a good young keeper, not the biggest, but clearly a player that you guys think has got a bit of potential as well by the sounds of things.
Yeah, definitely. He's part of the England youth setup as well. So yeah, he's been playing at youth levels for his country. Yeah, I think he's probably we've let go another of our young goalkeepers who's, I think he's about 22, 23, or they're about to leave, I think. So he's kind of rising up the ranks a little bit, but yeah, still a ways off first team football for us, I think.
Yeah, and finally, the last link I can find between the squads, one that you might struggle to remember played for you guys, Joe Riley, the Manchester United youngster. You had him on loan. I think he probably back then would have been playing right back for you guys, I think.
He might have played left back. So I do remember him because he's a good kind of quiz question of players who've played under Chris Wilder. That's how we passed our time when there was no football, basically doing Sporkle quizzes. And he's one of those that's so niche that everyone remembers it. So yeah, we had him on loan from Man United, and he did pretty well, but then he got quite a bad injury, so had to go back. Yeah,
he's had rotten luck with injuries in the last few years, and then he came to us from Bradford, having I think been there for 2 seasons and played like 4 games, I think, for them or something like that. Beach signed him, and we all thought he was a right back and he was going to be competing with George Tanner. We actually signed for Man United, funny enough. But then he played him in midfield, and he played 42 games in midfield for us last season. He's never played more than 6 games or something in a season. So he's one to watch out for. He's full of energy, and I'm sure he'll be determined to probably score a goal in this game to at least show, I'm still a decent player. So
yeah, no, he was for someone who only played a handful of games. He's very well thought of. I think we were struggling to kind of fill that position at the time, and he sort of slotted right in there. And yeah, people were understandably disappointed when he got injured, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's look ahead to the actual game and give predictions, what we like to do on our pod. So what are you going to predict for the match?
So I think that the last couple of times I've been to see United in the Cup against a team in League One or League Two, we've ended up losing, which has been quite frustrating. But no, I'm pretty confident that we can, as I say, I think it will be a strong team without masses of changes, which is usually where these things do fall apart when you change the entire 11.
Yeah.
So I will go for a 2-0 home win.
To be honest, I wouldn't be totally amazed by that. Personally, I'm probably going to go for a 1-1 draw, and then we'll probably lose on penalties. Would be sod's law. But we've actually got a surprisingly decent record against Championship clubs in the League Cup. We've beaten Blackburn, Ipswich, or when they were in the Championship, QPR, Bristol City, Barnsley actually a couple of years ago. So in the last 10 years or so, our record's not too bad, but I don't think we're quite as strong, and not helped by the fact that our vice captain was sold to Wrexham at the weekend. So money bags Wrexham are coming in to take part of our squad away is typical. But
I don't think we'll take this one lightly. No. I'll say that, which obviously would enhance our chances of getting through. I think with the new manager, there probably is a part of that that's like, we played a game, we didn't score, we obviously didn't win. Let's make sure we get something on the board. And there are still a few players, even the ones that started at the weekend, who do have a bit to prove. Ryan Brewster, for example, if he starts, he's still not scored for us. It's kind of used as, it's a little bit unfair because he's hardly started for us either. He's might have made like 27 appearances, but like 20 of them are from the bench. So I imagine he still wants to get that monkey off his back, though. So yeah, I think we'll be trying to win the game. Put it like that. It won't be as much as I say. We kind of need more friendlies in our legs. I do think we will be motivated to get a positive result. Yeah.
Thanks for your time, Ben. Really appreciate it, and good luck for the rest of the season after Tuesday night.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, same to you.
Cheers. Thanks again to Ben for taking his time out to chat with us about all things Sheffield United. Mike, it sounds like it's been a bit of a sort of tough summer for Sheffield United, hasn't it, in terms of trying to get games arranged as much as anything, really.
Yeah, I know a few Sheffield United fans, and there seems to be a split 50-50 of fans who think that they can bounce straight back up and fans who think that they're going to go down again. So it's like,
wow.
Yeah, it's
that
quite
drastic.
Exactly, quite a contrast, really. But it's interesting about Oliver Norwood, because when Sheffield United first got promoted, they apparently tried to transfer list him. And it had a few times in his career. I think he got promoted with Huddersfield to the Premier League, and then Huddersfield were like, thanks.
Fulham, wasn't he, as well, I think? For a bit.
Yeah, and they were basically like, thanks, but you're just not quite good enough for the Premier League, so we're going to let you go again, kind of thing. And when Sheffield United tried to transfer list him, he basically said, no, I'm not leaving. I've got promoted to the Premier League countless times in my career, and I haven't been given a chance to show what I can do at this level. And he obviously got given the chance, and he looked a very good player. But obviously, last season was just a culmination of disasters, wasn't it, really, for them?
Yeah. Never scored a goal for us, did he? I think he scored an own goal in one game, but he looked a decent player when he was on loan. He just got a bit unlucky, picked up an injury, didn't he, and had to go back. That's just the way it is. Okay, so before we get on to talking about Sheffield United opposition, the London branch has suggested as the away pub for this game, the Howard. No, not the one in Carlisle. Not go all the way to Carlisle to go to the pub. No, there's a place called the Howard. It's literally around the corner from the railway station. If you look it up on Google, you'll find it there. I think it's thehowardsheffield.co.uk is their website, if you want to look there. I've also seen a recommendation for the Sheffield Tap, which is right by the station. That's been quite highly recommended. So they're two places you can go for a pint before the game.
You kind of spoilt for choice at Bramall Lane, because it's a proper city centre football ground, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
It's not far away. It's a real short walk. Yeah, I think I've only been twice. I think both times I've been in the press box. So it'd be nice to actually be sat in the away end for once, actually, for this game. So yeah, it's obviously the Carabao Cup first round tie. Referee for this game, James Oldham. It's his third season as an EFL referee. He handed out 83 yellow cards and 4 red cards in his 29 games last season. His first ever EFL game was actually a United game. It was the opening game of the 1920 season where the Blues beat Crawley 2-1 at Brunton Park. He actually sent off Lewis Young, brother of Ashley, in this game in the 90th minute for a sort of, I say a headbutt, it was more sort of like a leaning in sort of thing. I think it was on Canis Carroll possibly. There's a blast from the past. He took charge of just one United game last season, the 2-0 win at Walsall, where Charters, Hayden and Armour were all booked. He's actually taken charge of 4 Carlisle United games in his EFL refereeing career, and United have won all 4 of them. So there's an interesting little omen for you. The first game he's refereed this season was Stevenage v Barrow, where he booked 10 players. So, I mean, bear in mind, like I said, he what was it, 83 cards last season, yellow cards? That's the equivalent of 11% of his cards that he handed out last season in one game. So, busy fella at the weekend, I think it's fair to say. Head-to-head record, 9 wins for the Blues, 5 draws and 12 Sheffield United wins. A lot tighter than I thought it would be, to be honest, because you think down the years, we've probably played them when we've been going up divisions and they've been sort of settled in either what's now the Championship or the Premier League. So it's a bit surprising it's quite tight.
I think we went a lot of years without being anywhere near the same division as them as well, really, didn't we? Yeah. Sort of.
And the games are fairly tight, actually, back in League One, 7 years ago. I mean, they only really battered us one thing, it was 3-1 in an away game, and the others were quite like tight 1-0s, I think, most of them. So
I think that away game was that the year we went down, and I think Sean O'Hanlon got sent off. I think
possibly. Can't remember if he played that game actually, but I think it was Jose Baxter was the last time we played him. He scored. So we'll come on to that first. Actually, before we go to the classic clash, let's talk about the last time we met. It was Sheffield United 1, Carlisle United 0. 2 sides met in League One. Last time we met in League One, United won the home fixture that season 1-0. Matty Robson scored a goal that just about got over the line with a header from a corner. But they suffered a narrow defeat in the reverse fixture at Bramall Lane in March later that year. This was the point, wasn't it, Mike, where United season was just collapsing, and I think a lot of the loanees that were doing well got recalled. The ones that replaced them were not up to the standard, and we had quite a few injuries as well. And it's weird, isn't it? On that season under Graham Cavan, people sort of reflecting and now and say we were awful, but actually, if you look at it, round about Christmas time, we weren't in a too bad a position. We were looking okay, and some of the loan signings that came in were pretty good, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird because that game that I mistakenly thought was the year we went down, it must have been the year before, because the year before we didn't look that good, and then we signed O'Hanlon, and he really shored up the defence. I think that's what you're thinking of. And then we relatively comfortably stayed up that year, but there were sort of cracks that it had papered over. And then obviously the year after, things just were awful, weren't they? And the big thing, I think we played over 40-odd players that season, didn't we, as well?
Yeah, like I said, the big issue was we actually had what was looking the core of an okay squad at around about Christmas time. But then with all those players getting recalled, I think the only real decent loan signing we had second half of the season was Jordan Pickford. The rest were just would dross. I mean, when you lose someone like Tom Lawrence and he's replaced with someone like Sam Byrne instead, you know you're in trouble, don't you? So
yeah, and Charney Nganka Gomini, or whatever his name is.
Ekamanga, I think it was. Something like that, wasn't it? Mikey Drennan as well, on loan from Aston Villa. God, he was dreadful too. Quite a few players who just were not up to the standard, it's fair to say. Jose Baxter scored the only goal for the Blades. Their side featured Harry Maguire and Connor Cody, as well as ex-Blues Stefan Skugel, who started the game, and then on the bench, unused subs Sean Miller and Billy Painter. Quite a mix of ex-Carlisle players on that side. United side features stars such as James Pearson, Reece Brown and Sam... I'm only joking here, really. In all cases, Jordan Pickford was in goal. Pascal Chimbonda was at the heart of defence. Nacho Novo came on for a rare sub-appearance during his short spell with the club. Once someone described him as playing like a farmer, I think, when he came on in the home game he played for us. So. Not the greatest player, was he? So, yeah, narrow defeat. And like I said, when you look back at that season, take away the battering at Preston, we just sort of slumped at a lot of narrow defeats, and we just couldn't find our way out of trouble by the end. So.
If Gary Medine wasn't on tag and could play in away games...
we would have stayed up, probably. It's the mad thing, maybe. Isn't it? We probably would have stayed up. Oh, that just sums things up, really, doesn't it, for us? The classic clash I picked out here, I mean, Mike, when you look through the results down the years, this is probably the one that stands out, isn't it? Especially in recent times. Carlisle United 3, Sheffield United 2 from January 2012. It was a New Year's Day game, I seem to remember this one. It was the Blades' first visit to Brunton Park in 26 years and saw the two sides play out what was an absolutely brilliant game of football. I don't know if you were at this one, Mike, but genuinely was a really exciting end-to-end good match of football.
Yeah, that was peak Greg Abbott inconsistent Carlisle United, though, wasn't it? Where like we would beat the likes of Sheffield United or Sheffield Wednesday or Leeds or whoever, but then we'd like lose against someone like Crawley 3 days later. Do you know what I mean? It's just.
To be honest, I think Crawley's a bad example because I think they've only ever beaten us once in history. But you're right, that's the kind of thing, really, wasn't it? Maybe lose to Rochdale or someone like that, wouldn't it? You'd just be infuriated as to why we just couldn't do it. But yeah, so this game, again, Harry Maguire played this game. I think this was his first full season as a professional. And he had an absolutely torrid time against Francois Zoku, who really turned him inside out for much of the game. Zoku opened the score after about 2 minutes, I think it was. And it was a sort of chip ball forward from McGovern. And it was such a clever ball because if you watch it again, he just tempts Maguire to try and come down for the header. And Zoku just nips in ahead of him. Gets the ball, he's away down the right, and he gets into the box and just slots it into the far corner past the keeper.
Yeah, I remember.
Ched Evans then equalised. Zoka then got a second. It was again quite a clever move. It was sort of like, I think it was like a lofted sort of cross across the box from, I think it was either McGovern or Taiwo, and it came to Lee Miller, who all the Sheffield United players think is offside, and he's not, and he's at the far post, and he could go for a goal himself, but he really intelligently brings it down and just sort of lays it off perfectly for Zoka to head into the empty net. Yeah. Really, really clever move. And then
what a pairing they were together, Zoka and Miller.
Oh, brilliant. And obviously then you put effectively Zoka playing on the left, Miller down the middle, and McGovern was on the right, wasn't he? And they just played so well together. And the third, obviously, Evans then equalised again for Sheffield United. But the second half, this is one of my favourite Carlisle United goals, really, because it's such a good move. We win the ball on the sort of down the left corner flag at the Waterworks, and the ball comes out to Murphy, who does a sort of a little Cruyff turn thing to take the defender out of play, and he plays the ball with his right foot into McGovern. He does this lovely flick with his back heel into Miller, who shows his strength, holds the player off, and lays it off perfectly for McGovern, who just side foots it into the bottom corner past the keeper. Genuinely one of my favourite Carlisle United goals because it's such a good move. And it's sort of, that summed up, like you said, Greg Abbott's Carlisle United side at its best. When it was playing like that, it was unplayable. They had those lovely little intricate little bits of play, didn't they?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, there's a misconception. A lot of our fans seem to think that we did not play nice football under Greg Abbott, and at times we really, really did. You know, there was them goals, and there was that home game against Huddersfield Town where obviously Lee Miller had that header, you know, and the absolute limbs at the end. But the first goal in that game, which I think was scored by Berrett, that was like a 15-20 pass move. You know, It was beautiful.
Yeah, and the thing with Abbott is, I think people have this weird misconception because they say, oh, you only ever play one striker. He was always playing 4-5-1. It was never 4-5-1. It was 4-3-3. It was always a 4-3-3. And this, at the time, people just had this weird obsession. You need to play two up front. We need to have two strikers. It wouldn't work. You'd get overrun in midfield because most teams were playing 4-3-3 at that point. It was the right thing to do at the time, but there you go. So yeah, there was 7,721 fans at that game. We were good, I think, 1,700 from Sheffield. But it was the United fans who went home happy, and yeah, it was, like I said, one of my favourite memories of that Greg Abbott Carlisle United side was that game. It was one of the, I just remember Brunton Park was really rocking that day. Okay, up next, it's the Played for Both section. Now, Dan's obviously not with us today, he's having to work while we're recording, but he did take the time to actually record the Played for us both section bit, so he's done it. I'm going to do a little one myself as well towards the end, but let's play this.
For my They Played for Both for this episode, I'm going back to the early 90s, and one of our good penalty takers of these times was a certain Andy Barnsley. He started his career at Rotherham for the season, then he got a transfer to Sheffield United where he had 3 seasons before going back to Rotherham, and then eventually joining Carlisle in 1991. Now, not long after joining Carlisle, he actually collapsed on the training pitch, and I think it was Peter Hampton brought him basically back to life. You know, it was a bit of like what happened to Christian Eriksen at the Euros this summer. But, you know, thankfully recovered and came back and probably scored his most famous goal for Carlisle from the spot. Penalty in the 2-2 League Cup draw with Norwich City under the Brunton Park floodlights, which was a really big game at the time because Norwich were, I think they finished third in the Premier League that season. But yeah, that's my played for both for this episode, Andy Barnsley.
There you go. Thanks for that one, Dan. Not a player that I think either me or you. I mean, you were not 2 or something when he played for us. But yeah, I've no memory of him either. But Dan, obviously, he goes back a bit further than us, so he's able to tell us all about that. So yeah, there you go. I've now got a list to read out of all the players who I could find that play for both. I think I've missed a few from this because the problem with searching through the list that I do rely a little bit on Wikipedia for this. Is that I often look at a player and think, oh, did he play for both? And quite often I'm right, actually. But then with this one, I keep thinking of Sheffield Wednesday players. And there's a lot of Sheffield Wednesday players as well as a lot of Sheffield United players who've played for Carlisle United. So there you go. So the list, starting off, the one I'm going to do, I'll read out at the end because that's one of the last ones here. Wilfred A.D., I think he played sort of pre-World War One, even possibly pre-Second World War for Carlisle United. Taker of probably the most famous corner in Carlisle United history. Graham Anthony, he played about 3 games for Sheffield United where he started his career before. I think he had a spell at Plymouth Argyle and then came to United. Alan Ashman, United's probably most famous manager other than maybe Bill Shankly. He played for Sheffield United during the war, I think it was, as sort of a wartime guest player, but obviously most famously as a player and a manager for Carlisle United, probably one of the club's biggest legends. Teddy Ashton, another one of those very, very early Carlisle United players. Tommy Black, who had a loan spell from Arsenal at Carlisle United. I think he might have been on loan at Sheffield United, although maybe went there permanently, I'm not sure. Reece Brown, previously mentioned. Obviously, he had a spell as well at United. I think brother of Wes, isn't he, Reece? I seem to remember because he was on loan. He was on loan from Watford at United, wasn't he? But I think he was at Manchester United originally. Here's a real blast from the past. Danny Cadamartri, another one who played for both. Jamal Campbell-Rice, again the £500 mark. That's 2 games in a row he's been mentioned.
Yeah, he played for a lot of clubs, didn't he?
Honestly, I would not be surprised if he's played for Swindon and we have to name him again at the weekend. It would be typical. Willie Carlin, one of the 60s, 70s sort of players. Bert Chandler, again, another one, a very, very early Carlisle United player. A favourite of mine, I think a favourite of yours as well, Mike. Tom Cowan, a player who certainly left his, played with his heart on his sleeve, didn't he? He was a terrific player and just the player we needed for that period. I know a lot of people were sad when he left after we got one promotion from the National League. I think it was probably the right time to do that there, wasn't it? I think. Yeah,
well, I mean, we got Ziegor in to replace him, didn't we? So the rest was history.
You can't really argue with that. I think Ziegor was a bit of an upgrade, especially in terms of quality, definitely. He was an upgrade on Tom. Up next is... I lost him here. Sorry. John Cullen. John Cullen is up next. He was on loan, I think, under Ian Atkins. He played about 10 games towards the end of that season. But he started, I think, his career at Sheffield United. I did actually miss one there. I just realised Darren Carr, another lad who played for Sheffield United early in his career. He was on loan again under Ian Atkins, actually, funny enough. I think he was on loan from Chesterfield or Brighton, one of the two. Couple of goalkeepers next. Mervyn Day played, I think, like one or 2 games on loan for Sheffield United. Just before he signed for United for his sort of brief spell as a player before he became a coach.
It's not many goalkeepers going to coaching / management, is there?
No, there isn't. It's unusual, isn't it? Also, he only actually managed at one club, and that is Carlisle, funny enough, weirdly. But
they are absolute head cases, to be fair to them.
A lot of them are, yeah. Speaking of goalkeepers, another one, Andy Dibble. Now, there's a man who played for a hell of a lot of clubs. He was, I'm not sure he actually played a game for Sheffield United, but I think he had 2 spells there as a player. His spell at United, he only played 2 games on loan, I think, from Hartlepool. It was famously in that season, the 99-00 season, where I think we had 6 different goalkeepers play for us over the campaign. I think it was Luke Weaver, Peter Keane, Michael Ingham, Peter van der Kwak, Barry Thompson, Andy Dibble. So there's 6. I think I've missed a couple more, possibly. There was famously the lad, I think, Olsen, the Norwegian keeper, who pulled his hamstring running to the airport to get his flight to Carlisle for the game. But only at Carlisle United could that possibly happen, really.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
just typical, but there you go. Andy Dibble. Peter Duffield. You remember him, Mike? He was in the season we went down to the conference. He played, I think, 10 games, scored 3 goals towards the end of the season. brought in as an
recollection of him.
experienced striker. I think he was at Boston United for a bit as well. But he was a decent enough forward, actually, to be fair. Did a job at the time, basically. Another club legend, Bob Hatton. He's played for both clubs. Dean Henderson, I'm throwing him in there, even though he actually never played for Carl United at a senior level. Evan Horwood started his career at Sheffield United. Jamie Hoyland had a brief spell at the Blues. He had a couple of seasons with the Blades as well. Kevin Hurst started his career at Sheffield United. Didn't play a first team game, I don't think, for them. But he obviously had a decent spell at United. I think he was our record signing for a brief period as well. I don't know if he still is, actually.
Yeah. Because I think his deal was a lot of add-ons, so it's whether or not he actually was, I don't know.
No, he's one of those ones I'm not 100% sure. Next, Steve Ludlam. I think he was a player in the 80s, possibly. I seem to remember. Here's one that people tend to forget. Gary Medine. Not only did he play for both, but he also played for both Sheffield clubs. Quite a surprise considering what actually happened with him, but
yeah,
in terms of Sheffield United fans, he endeared himself to them when he was at Sheffield Wednesday. Let's just leave it at that, shall we?
Well, he was a key player in getting them promoted to the Premier League.
Yeah, he was.
And he loved winding up the Sheffield Wednesday fans while he did it. So
yeah, quite incredible, isn't it? There you go. Okay, up next, Craig McCautry started his career at Sheffield United as a YTS player. I don't think he ever made it as a senior player. Obviously, he was at United, sort of played as an emergency striker in a couple of games when he was actually a defender, and he scored a couple of goals against Macclesfield, I seem to remember. Up next is Sean McGinty, the 1 minute man. Never mind the 1 game wonder, the 1 minute wonder. He literally probably the shortest Carl United career you'll ever come across. Came on as a sub against Preston? Or maybe against Huddersfield? I can't remember. I think it was a Boxing Day game, I seem to remember. He came on as a sub in the last minute. In injury time, that is the last minute of injury time. And I think I'm not sure he even touched the ball.
No.
Incredible. But yeah, he was at Sheffield United for a bit as well. John Paul McGovern. Interesting one. I forget this one. Early on in his career, he actually had a loan spell at Sheffield United. But obviously went on to play for Wednesday as well. And actually did quite well. I think he scored in a playoff final for them. So one of those players that gets a little bit overlooked, doesn't he, really, in terms of Carolina history. I really rated McGovern. I think he was a terrific player for us. Sean Miller, he had a spell at the Blades as well. Oliver Norwood, obviously, we've already mentioned. Michael O'Halloran, another 1 game wonder. He had a spell with the Blades. Billy Painter. It's a shame Dan's not on, really, because he could wax lyrical about Billy Painter, couldn't he, if he was on? Yeah. He had a spell with the Blades. Again, I don't think he did that well, actually, with Sheffield United.
No.
Vincent Perricard, again, he had a loan spell with them. Tony Philliskirk had a loan spell with the Blues, but I think he actually was quite a popular player at Sheffield United. Stefan Skugel, we mentioned before, obviously. Grant Smith, he had a spell as a player at Sheffield United. Richard Tracy began his career at Sheffield United. I don't think he actually made a first team appearance either, but he did pretty well there. And finally, the one I'm going to pick out as my play for both. And I'm picking this one out deliberately because I know that I'm going to the game with John McGee, and he's a big fan of this player as well. It's, of course, Paul Furwell, Captain Marvel himself. Yeah, Paul obviously started his career at Sunderland, his hometown club. Made 77 appearances for them. Had a brief loan spell at Swindon Town in 1999. But after not really sort of establishing himself, at least as a regular at the Stadium of Light, he then made the move to Sheffield United. He had 1 season with the Blades, made 30 appearances and scored 1 goal. I'm not 100% certain if that was in the Premier League or not, actually. I think it was a Championship level, actually. But yeah, he only had the 1 season there, and then he signed for Derby County. He never really established himself at the Rams either. Made 21 appearances, then joined the Blues on loan in 2006. Played 14 games on loan. I mean, he looked really impressive, didn't he, when he came in? He fitted so well into the system, and he was a really good holding midfielder.
He had that red card at Tranmere. I think that was during the loan spell. That was
one of my favourite red cards. That he took out. I think was it Calvin Zola. He took him out at like hip height because allegedly he'd spat at him earlier in the game.
It was like a judo throw, wasn't it?
It was a blatant one where you could tell that he's done something to him earlier in the game, and that's revenge, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a spectacular red card, to say the least. Then he signed permanently for the Blues in January of that year. in 2007. Went on to make 214 appearances and score 7 goals, including some absolute belters and some vital goals as well, wasn't it? I mean, his volley against Millwall's the obvious one to mention.
Oh, yeah.
On his weaker foot as well, his left foot, you've got to say. Brilliant strike that was. Ended up spending 8 years with the club. Captained the side twice at Wembley, including obviously the win in 2011. Left the club in 2015, having sort of done a few coaching roles as well at the club, hadn't he? By then, he'd been interim manager briefly under Keith Curle, but he left not long after that. Curle wanted his own team in, just the way it was. Moved to Harrogate Town, played 26 games for them, scored 1 goal. He's now assistant manager at Harrogate Town and doing pretty well there, to be fair. It's one of those ones you do wonder in future, maybe you'll come up with a possible suggestion to be a Carl United manager, if the job comes up.
Yeah, possibly.
You never know, do you? You never know. Okay, well, let's get on to actually talking about Sheffield United now then. The Blades, they've had an incredible run over the last 4 or 5 seasons, haven't they, Mike? When you look at it, it's just, under Chris Wilder, they went to heights I don't think they possibly imagined they could. Obviously, the dream was always to get back in the Premier League, but I think the aim was always at first to get them into the Championship and establish themselves, at least over a longer period. But to get up to the Premier League as quickly as they could was quite incredible. And it did look at one point, as we mentioned there when we were talking with Ben earlier, that it did look like they could well get themselves into the Premier League, into the Champions League, didn't it, at one point? Yeah,
and I felt that Wilder was kind of unlucky to not win Manager of the Season that year. Obviously, like, Jurgen Klopp won it, didn't he? And obviously Liverpool had won the league. But, I mean, what he'd managed to do with that team was incredible.
I think any other season he would have got it, wouldn't he? I think probably. Yeah, but just Klopp getting Liverpool to their first title and so comfortably to their first title as well. He was always going to be the one who got the award, I think, for that season. But yeah, it's like I said, they're under a bit of a rebuild now, aren't they, by the looks of things? And the thing with Wilder was they had a very distinctive style in the way they played, didn't they?
Yeah. Kind of gung-ho, like just absolute grafters, wasn't it, really?
Well, it was grafters, but it was unusual because they play with like these 3 centre-backs, but the centre-backs overlapped, bombed forward, didn't they? It was a really, really unusual style, and it caught a lot. That's the thing. I think it caught a lot of teams out in the first season, and when they cottoned onto it, and when they got a few injuries that meant the first choice centre-backs missed out games, that's when they suddenly started to struggle a bit, wasn't it, I think? So.
Yeah, as well. And a lot of the games I saw when they had Dean Henderson and Nets, there were games that they could have lost 2-3-1, but they won 1-0 because he was in goal. Yeah.
And having him in goal and a defence that was so solid in front of him as well made a huge difference for them last season. Obviously, last season was a bit of a disaster for them, I think it's fair to say. It's going to be a tough one for them this year, I think, possibly to maybe bounce back at the first attempt because...
Yeah, I think so.
We'll get onto it in a minute, but they've not been particularly busy in terms of transfers. Let's talk about the manager, Slavica Jukanovic. Former Chelsea player, he's built up quite a reputation, hasn't he, as being a coach that likes his sides to play decent attacking football, and he's managed to get promotion twice from the Championship to the Premier League with Watford the first time, and he left after that because he couldn't agree a new contract. I think he went to Maccabi Haifa, I think it was, in Israel. And then obviously won it with Fulham, but trying to continue to play that style with Fulham in the Premier League just didn't quite work, did it? So he's hoping to make it a hat-trick, isn't he, with Sheffield United this season, and it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. Starman I've picked out here. There's so many players you could have picked for this, isn't there, really, when you look at it? They've got a squad that is still packed with quality and a lot of experience as well. It's one thing that stands out. But the man I picked out is probably one of the most experienced of the lot. It's Billy Sharp. I mean, he's a proper Sheffield United and EFL legend. He's got 247 goals in his 598 first-team appearances. It's a shame it could have been his 300th appearance for in the first... as a professional against us if it had been a game later. He's currently in his third spell with the club and he's now club captain. He's a brilliant player, isn't he? Sharp. I mean, I remember back when he was at Scunthorpe on loan for Sheffield United. He was brilliant then, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think that was the 06-07 season, our first year back in League One. He scored like 30 odd goals for Scunthorpe and like he was this sort of hot prospect, and now he's the experienced striker.
Well, it's mad, isn't it? Because he went on loan to Scunthorpe, did really well. They signed him permanently, and then Sheffield United, because they signed him from Sheffield United. Sheffield United then were like, "Oh shit, he's actually quite good," and re-signed him again. And I think they paid something like 10 times what they sold him for to get him back. Yeah. So, a bit of a mistake, it was fair to say, on that occasion. But yeah, he's been at all kinds of clubs. He's been at Southampton, hasn't he, as well, and Doncaster, and he's done the round, and he's obviously back at Sheffield United now. He's playing the Premier League for them, which I think was always his ambition, wasn't it? So yeah, he's had a fantastic career. I picked a few out. Mike, I don't know if you want to talk about some of these ones in their squad as well that they've got. I mean, like I say, it's packed with quality, isn't it, really, their squad? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, it's hard for us to sort of, because normally we'd talk about the star man who's going to be playing against us and cause us a few problems, but a game like this, you don't necessarily know which players will be playing against us. Obviously, John Fleck was brilliant for them, when they had that high-flying season, but he was down, League 1, League 2 level for Coventry not too long ago?
Yeah.
And then, he just seems to... Because he was rated really highly at Rangers, wasn't he?
Yeah, they really rated him highly, because I think his dad was a player for Rangers, wasn't he? And he was quite a popular player when he was there. And there was hopes he would become the next big star, but I don't think it ever quite works for him there. I think he was 16 when he made his debut for them or something like that.
Yeah. And then obviously he finally picked it up. I think he could probably still do a job in the Premier League, to be honest with you. But and obviously Norwood, as we mentioned earlier, and O'Connell, he was injured largely last season, wasn't he? I think they missed him massively. But yeah,
and then the obvious one to pick out, Aaron Ramsdale, who was obviously England's third choice keeper thanks to Henderson's injury
and Pope's injury.
And Pope's injury as well, sorry, I forgot about that. So he's really fifth choice, but he's a young, to be fair, he's a very young lad. He's 22, 23, something like that, so time's very much on his side there. In terms of summer recruitment, they've been really quiet, in fact, to the point that they haven't actually signed anyone yet, which, with a new manager coming in as well, that'd be a worry, wouldn't it, I suppose? I mean, I know they've got a quality squad, but if they're going to change the style of play, moving away from that three at the back, they're probably going to need a couple of signings in, and so far they've not been so lucky, have they?
You'd think that they'd have a few quid in the bank, obviously from the outside looking in, because when they were in the Premier League, they weren't splashing the cash like mad, like some teams do when they come up. I don't think they had anyone on particularly crazy wages.
No.
And obviously the parachute money you get and all the rest of it. But I mean, that's from the outside looking in. They could have owners siphoning off money to the Cayman Islands for all we know. I don't know, but
allegedly, can we just put that in there? We're not suggesting they're doing that. That's just
no.
Mike having a joke, I hope. But yeah, so like I said, in terms of departures, Simon Moore, the goalkeeper, long serving, he never quite established himself as a first team player. He's gone to Coventry City, and the midfielder John Lundstrom, he played quite a lot in the Premier League for them, didn't he? He's moved north of the border to join Scottish champions Rangers. I think they're expecting probably a couple of players to leave before the transfer window ends as well. I mean, the two names that stand out, Sander Berg, the Norwegian international, I think their record signing. He's not really played much for them, has he? Because I think he's been injured for a lot of his time at Bramall Lane. He's attracting interest from Seville and Arsenal, and the latter actually are also interested in Ramsdale. So you wouldn't be totally amazed to see both of them leave, and that would give them even more money to play with. I'd imagine you're probably going to see a flurry of players arriving with them probably over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And particularly as well, I mean, we mentioned it in the season preview, not a lot of players have done their sort of loaning out, the big clubs.
No, definitely not.
And obviously the sort of the young prospects at the big Premier League clubs, they'll be certainly looking to loan them out to Championship clubs, and obviously like Henderson was for them, and that's where you can get a real key player that can be the difference between going up and not.
Yeah, definitely. And as obviously the guys from the BladesPod mentioned there, probably likely to just tweak around the edges, because I mean they've had a pre-season to forget in terms of fixtures. They're obviously only playing 2 games, and as he mentioned, it probably would have been ideal for us to play this game on the Saturday, the 31st. It's almost an extra pre-season game for us. That would have been ideal. Funny enough, Aaron Hayden would have played in a game for us probably then if that had been the case. But sod's law, there you go. So yeah, we're not expecting huge changes. We're probably expecting tweaks around the edges, but as I said, when you look at the bench they had at the weekend, if they're bringing like 3 or 4 players off that, then they're still going to be unbelievable quality, aren't they? I mean, you've got your likes of your Bogle even on there. You've got Sharp on there. You've got McBurney on there. You know, it's not going to be an easy task. Let's just say that.
No.
Okay, look at United for this game. Obviously we're not going to touch too much on the Colchester game, but the thing to build on is another clean sheet, really, isn't it, at the weekend? That was really the positive, and
especially given the sort of last-minute rearrangements we had to make in that department.
Absolutely, definitely, and even the changes up front as well, obviously with Clough pulling out in the warm-up. How seriously do we take this game? It's a difficult one, isn't it? It's probably the toughest tie we could have had in terms of, obviously, rankings. They're, I think, the highest-rated club left in, because obviously the clubs that finished 19th and 18th in the Premier League don't come in until the second round, do they, to balance things out in terms of numbers of sides in the draw. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough one, because I can imagine Sheffield United, like I said, they're going to want to impress, having struggled at the week. Well, not struggled, but gone down to a defeat at the weekend against Birmingham. Do we look at it as maybe a chance to sort of test new things out, maybe? I mean, the style of play is clearly going to have to change this season, or be tweaked at least, because we haven't really got a Coyote or a Zanzala up front, a big man who's going to win a lot of those flick-ons. So what do we do? Do you tweak it around the edges?
Yeah, I think so, a little bit. Give some time to players who just need a few minutes, maybe. Obviously, do we swap the keeper for a cup game? I think I remember when we signed Jensen, he was touted as a penalty stopping expert. Oh. So could that be a route that you'd want to go down on the chance it goes to penalties? I mean,
Norman did save a penalty against Orient towards the end of last season. The game down there. So yeah, it's one of those ones. I think personally, I would give Jensen the game. I think we've got to see what he's like in a professional outfit game. Norman will come back in for the weekend against Swindon anyway, so there's no concerns there. So it'd just be nice to see what he's like. Because, I mean, I'll touch on this with Dan at the weekend, but Norman's kicking was a little bit ropey at the weekend. It's interesting. It's noticeable how much of a step down it is from having someone like Farman. I mean, Farman's a freak at this level in the fact that he can kick with both feet comfortably under pressure and get it into the opposition half every time. But even allowing for that, Norman was shanking it out a lot, and we were targeting Dickinson a lot. And Dickinson's not good in the air. That's one thing that was very clear from watching the game. He was struggling to win his headers, and that's not what you got him in there for. So
maybe maybe Norman's kicking is something that our goalkeeper coach can really.
Because let's be fair, Dan, I'm sure you'll be a decent goalkeeper coach, but his kicking wasn't the best as a player. So hopefully he knows the flaws there, and he can. Because the thing is, actually, Handful could kick it far. He just kicked out of play a lot. That was the problem.
Yeah.
So,
I was tempted when he was at Southport, because they don't have the biggest stadium to just sort of stand behind the main stand on a Saturday afternoon.
Pick up some balls.
Yeah.
For free. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I mean, our record actually against Championship clubs isn't too bad in the League Cup, is it? When you look back down the recent years, maybe the last 10 or 12 years. I mean, we've beaten what? I mean, we beat Bristol City away in a game. That was second round, obviously, that was. We've beaten QPR, Ipswich, Blackburn. Who else was it? Who did we beat? Barnsley the other years. There's 5 off the top of my head. I'm sure there's probably a couple I've missed in there as well. So it just goes to show, we can get results in these games. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, I'd probably stick Mellish in there, because the way that I've seen it, like physical attributes, it doesn't matter what level you're at. If you are physically strong, if you are fit, if you could run all day, whatever level opposition you're playing, you can cause a lot of problems. It's more technical ability that's the sort of difference between obviously Championship and League Two teams, but. Mellish will run around all day and really cause problems for any team at any level.
Well, we'll touch on midfield in a minute, because actually Mellish was one of the points I'd put in there, and it's a fair point, that. In terms of defence, I mean, it pretty much picks itself, bar maybe do you give Feeney a run out, and if you do that, what do you do? I mean, for me, I would start McDonald, whatever, because he's experienced head. He's nearly 30 now. I think in a game like this, you do need an experienced head. And actually, he had a great game against Colchester. He really did. He was really impressive. He was the sort of the leader at the back, and Whelan really responded well to that. So what do you do? Do you stick with those two and try and sort of build a partnership for now, knowing that you might not have a defender in for a little while? Or do you maybe give Feeney a run out just to see where he's at, maybe? It's a tough choice, isn't it?
It's tough, yeah. And, I wouldn't be too fussed if Beach went either way on that, to be honest, because, Feeney does need minutes, but I don't want to be rushing him back from his recent little knock either.
Yeah, I mean, Beach did comment after the game that he's brought in Whelan not as a centre-back, really, so he obviously sees him more as a sort of full-back who can fill on both sides. But he seems to be quite impressed with how he did in that game. And obviously Joe Riley wasn't really necessarily brought in as a midfielder originally. He did really well in that role, so that might be the role that he settles down into, Whelan, possibly. So, I think it's a tough one. I think I'd probably stick with it, because if it's maybe going to take you a little while to get a defender in, I'd rather build them up as a partnership and see how they do than chop and change things around. But I think it's a choice for me. I know there's others who'll disagree, but I think it's McDonald one over, and I think it probably will be Whelan. I think we'll stick with that.
Yeah, Whelan was a few people's man of the match on Saturday as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think I said between him and McDonald, basically, for me. I thought they were both brilliant. Midfield, you've obviously sort of briefly touched on it. What do you do with Mellish? I mean, for me, I would be tempted to stick with him for this game, because he was so close to scoring a goal on Saturday. He had that, 3 chances, I think, and he's shown he's basically still got that instinct to get in the right areas, and it's one of those ones where probably once he gets a goal, he's going to go off on a run again. So do you maybe just give him that another chance to say, right, go out there and show what you can do, or do you sort of change it up and give him a rest? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I said before, I'd certainly stick him in there. I think, if Sheffield United have a few, if they're playing a few sort of young players, in their team, they're not used to coming up against a John Mellish for under 23 level, are they? Do you know what I mean? So
bulldoze his way through them.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, I'd definitely start him. And the rest, it just depends on sort of fitness and sort of half keeping an eye to next weekend as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, if I was going to make a tweak there, I'd maybe take Riley out for this game and maybe give Charters a run out just to see where he's at. He's done really well in pre-season. I think we've had plenty of games in pre-season. We've had a few knocks and injuries. I think it's best to maybe sort of keep it fresh and make sure those sub-players are ready to come in. I would probably look to maybe bring in Charters for this game for Riley, possibly. I mean, Callum Guy's going to start as captain, and he's essential to the team. There's no way he's not playing in this game.
I mean, the only thing for me is Charters. He seems similar-ish to Mellish in that he's kind of got a lot of energy, and sometimes if you play two of them players in the middle at the same time, you can potentially leave big gaps.
Possibly. Maybe one of those games where you need players who can have a bit of energy and get about and be a bit physical, I suppose.
Yeah.
You never know. Possibly that. I mean, then I'd like to see Dixon come in as well, maybe on the bench at least, to give him a chance to possibly have a run out. Up front, I think this is probably the area where you can change things. I think you probably do make a couple of tweaks here, because they did okay as a front three at the weekend, but they don't fill me with confidence that they're going to provide a lot of goals. Abrahams, Dickinson and Alessandra, to be honest, they're good players, but I'm not sure them as a three together is really going to work. I mean, it would have been different maybe if Clough had been playing as your number 10, feeding the ball through to Abraham, possibly. But for me, that as a front three didn't work. I'd like to see it changed up. I'd maybe like to see Mampala come in possibly for Abrahams, maybe, give him a rest for this game, and I'd probably swap Alessandra for Toure and just have a go at them.
Well, I mean, creating chances wasn't the issue at all, was it, against Colchester?
No.
It was putting them in the back of the net, and there's a few players who I think maybe they just need to get a goal, and then they'll be scoring quite a few. But yeah, I mean, we have so many options. It's ridiculous. I mean, we were talking about sort of with the midfield on Twitter, and just how if we to go down the sort of 4-2-3-1 route, you could play Joe Riley as a winger. He's quick and he's good in the ball and he can put good balls in the box. But then you're leaving sort of an Alessandra or Dickinson or Toure or someone out, or Mampala. we have a lot of options there, and I would like to see us play an entirely different front three just to sort of see what they can do, and then sort of, have it sort of winner stays on, if you like. If you're playing good games, you stay in the team. If you're not, you're out, and just sort of rotate on that kind of basis.
So you're suggesting we drop Dickinson, Abrahams and Alessandra and bring in, Toure, Bell and Mampala?
Well, maybe not Bell for this one, but yeah, certainly I'd like to see Toure on sort of the big pitch there, doing what he can do, and that'd be great to see. And yeah, it's so tough because there's a lot of front threes that Beach could announce, and I'll say, yeah, I'm not going to argue with that.
Yeah, I think to be honest, watching the game last week again, I'll touch on this with Dan at the weekend, but I do feel like, having watched that game, we are probably missing another forward. Maybe I think maybe it would be nice if we could maybe even use some of that money from Hayden. If we can split it between getting a defender and getting a striker in, that would probably be quite nice. But I imagine it'd probably be used for one or the other, based on the way things are at Colchester United.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I just think that numbers-wise, we have a few strikers, and I can't see the board been too willing to part with cash for another one.
No,
but
that's true.
I'm not saying that we don't necessarily need one, but I just can't see us, providing the funds to do that.
No, definitely not. Okay, Mike, well, that's pretty much summed up the preview bit, so let's do the match predictions for the end. Obviously, we did them at the weekend. I need to work out who got closest on the attendance. I think it was you, Mike, wasn't it? What did you go for? And in fact, you went for stupidly high, didn't you?
I went like 7-2 or something.
So I don't think you've got it then, because I will definitely be closer. But I think it might be Dan, because I think he went for around about that amount, so well done to Dan.
But was it that though?
It's one of those ones, isn't it? People always say that, you look bigger, but actually when you look at these things, there's a lot of gaps that you don't really notice because it all sort of blends into one. But there you go. Okay, so up first, Dan has sent us our predictions, so I'll play his. We're not going to do attendance predictions for this game because it's a very difficult one to sort of work out, and to be honest, we probably won't do them for away games. We'll just do them for home games. So there you go. So here's Dan's predictions.
My prediction: League Cup games always tough until you see the team sheets from the so-called bigger sides. I believe Sheffield United has only had 2 or 3 pre-season games and could possibly treat this as a pre-season game. I'd like to think we could maybe snatch a 1-1 draw and take it to penalties, but I'm going to go for a 2-1 defeat. Goal scorer, Mampala.
There you go. That's Dan's prediction. He's gone for a defeat. It's quite rare for any of us to go for defeat. I think we only did it 2 or 3 times last season. We were on the really bad run. So there you go. Mike, what are you going to go for?
Well, I'm going to go for what Dan didn't go for, and I'm going to go for 1-1 and the Blues to win on pens. And I'm going to say our goal scorer will be Jimmy Toure.
Oh, there you go. Well, I'm going to go very similar. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. The old Archbishop Desmond. And I'm going to go with goal scorers of Toure and Lewis Bell will come off the bench and get the second equaliser. So, yeah, and I think we'll win on penalties as well. There you go. That's what I'm going for. So we've been mildly optimistic, but not too optimistic on this episode in terms of that. But we'll see how that goes. Mike, thanks again for joining me. Really do appreciate it. Thanks again to our sponsors, the London branch. Really appreciate their support over the season. It's really, really helping us. Remind to everyone out there, you can subscribe to the podcast on any good podcast app. Just search for the Brunton Bugle, click subscribe, and then every time we release an episode, it'll come straight into your little inbox. And there you go, easy as that. And also, if you can give us a review, give us a 5-star review if you can, that'd be fantastic. Not had a chance to look up whether they're in new countries, Mike, so they may well be in there. Don't know. We'll find out on Friday's episode. That's when we'll reveal that. In terms of episodes coming up, as we mentioned, there's going to be an episode coming out on Friday again to preview the Swindon game, and we'll probably look to try and get a little mini episode to preview the Port Vale game as well next Monday. That's it, Mike. Thanks once again for joining me.
Cheers.
When's the next game you're getting to? It's going to be a while off, isn't it, I think?
It's Hartlepool.
So you're going to go to Hartlepool, are you?
Yeah, obviously they still haven't leaked the ticket info on that, so, and I'd imagine that we may well, fill that away end. So.
August bank holiday weekend, it's going to be rammed, isn't it? I'm not going to make that one, unfortunately. I'm giving that one a miss this year, but no, that should be a good one. And both me and you are going to Sutton away, aren't we? In September. So that should be a cracking day out. That one should be. There you go. Thanks again, Mike. Thanks everyone for listening, and up the Blues.
Up the Blues.